The celebration of our acceptance of the Torah is on Shavuot. It was the time when the Aseret HaDibros were given to us, the Ten Commandments, which is the core of everything else that exists in the Torah. I did do a series many years ago, which is on the RabbiLapin.com website, but that's about 15 or 20 shiurim on the Aseret HaDibros. We'll only have a chance to look at the very beginning of it, just to touch the beginning, but we'll be able to learn a lot from that. And one of the ideas, there's the Ramban at the beginning of the Aseret HaDibros. Ani Hashem Elokecha. Hadibur hazeh mitzvat aseh, says the Ramban. This dibur is not just a statement, I am the Lord your God. It's not just stating the authorship of the Ten Commandments, and then the Ten Commandments follow. Anochi Hashem Elokecha is the first of the Ten Commandments. What is the commandment? Amar Anochi Hashem Yoreh, what Hashem is teaching us, Veyitzaveh otam, and commanding us, Sheyed'u v'ya'aminu ki yesh Hashem, to know and to believe that there is a God. Yesh Hashem. And look at the words. Firstly, he gives both words. You've got to know it and you've got to believe it. They're two different things. And what you see is the order. One might think it should be you should believe it and then get to the higher level where you don't just believe it, you know it. You see from that Ramban, it's the other way around. To believe something is much higher than to know something. To know something, it's rational and it's data, but we know very well that data changes. We know very well we never have all the available data. You only have a portion of the available data, and therefore we know that our knowledge is incomplete. So there's always an imperfection in knowledge based on data. But emunah is something different. Emunah is something that I know so deeply within me, I don't have a doubt about it. It's got nothing to do with data. It's just something I know with absolute clarity. One of the examples I often give to illustrate the difference is if an aeronautical engineer were to show you a design of a very flimsy structure and he shows you mathematically how this very flimsy structure can fly. And he says, do you believe me? You say, yeah, you're an aeronautical engineer. I don't know, you know. So he makes a little plane with paper and wood. And he says, this is the paper that I designed for you. This is the plane I designed for you on the piece of paper. This plane can fly. And you say, I believe you. By believe him, you mean I accept it. And then he says to you, well, if you believe me, would you like to be the first passenger? That's when emunah starts kicking in. I know that you're right, but that it's in my heart, I don't feel comfortable. That not feeling comfortable means emunah is not full yet. That emunah is feeling completely comfortable. The Chazon Ish and others talk about emunah is at the point where you don't experience worry. You don't know, worry is just not something you experience. You do hishtadlut, of course. You go about your work, you make provision, you make plans, you implement plans, you do all the things we have to do. But once you've done what you have to do, no worry. If we're worried, that's a lack of emunah at that particular moment, that we're worried. We're actually lacking in emunah at that moment. So it's very seldom that we are fully in that space of emunah. But we see from the Ramban that first comes yediyah. You know that Hashem exists. Why? Because you know it. There's evidence of it. You look at the world and it just doesn't make sense to say that this whole universe was just random. These things just don't make sense from a perspective of just rationality. There's enough rational reason to say there must be a God, but that doesn't necessarily impact your behavior. That doesn't make you change your life. Once you've got yediyah, once you know that there's a God, now you start developing emunah, where you feel there's a God. You're conscious of God. You're aware of Him. He's present. He's in front of you. I've talked to you often about the experience of being in the presence of, and some of you have had that experience of being in the presence of an Adam Gadol, of a great tzaddik, a great talmid chacham, and the real greats. And when you look at their faces, you realize you're in the presence of a person who is in the presence of Hashem. You can see on their face that they can see Hashem in front of them. There's a reflection of Hashem in their faces. And there were times when I used to go and visit with Reb Meir Soloveitchik, where the hour we would spend together, probably, there were times when maybe 4 or 5 minutes were in conversation. And the rest of the time was in silence. And I relished that silence time. Just to be present, in the presence of somebody who was absolutely clearly in the presence of Hashem. You could see on their face that you kind of looked around for Hashem because it was so obvious that he could see Hashem. And so it was with all the great person that I had the privilege of knowing. That's emunah. Emunah is when you feel Hashem next to you. You feel Hashem in front of you when you're davening. You feel Hashem in your home. You feel Hashem when you're driving. You feel Hashem when you're traveling. You feel Hashem when you're working. You feel Hashem when He's there, He's present, He's part of it all. You feel Him inside you. You feel Him around you. You feel His embrace. You feel His caring. You feel His awareness, His consciousness. It's all there. You feel the energy of Hashem. That's emunah. It's in the heart. It's something that you feel. And this idea of yedi'ah and emunah, of knowledge and experiential understanding, knowledge and experience, we use together. They were both used in Matan Torah. They're both critical at the Sinai experience, and they're both critical every time you open a Sefer and you learn that both of them are working together. If you're working without the rational, who knows where you land up? You're some kind of cuckoo land. If you're working without the emotional, you've got some cold data and information that's not going to change behavior. It's being able to align and integrate the rational with the experiential, and to be able to find the place where they live together. And where there's conflict, to be able to manage that conflict. The importance of the yediyah part of knowledge, let's go now beyond the Ramban in the sense of what we're obligated to believe in God and to know God. Knowledge can be converted into electronic signals that can be transmitted then instantaneously, speed of light, virtually instantaneously. That's what knowledge can do. Data can be converted into electronic impulses which can be transmitted instantly. Knowledge has infinite reach. How far can you radiate? How far can you transmit this information? Across the universe, there's no limit. Not so emunah, not so intuitive understanding and experiential knowledge. That you can't transmit. It's hard enough to inspire somebody with it, but to inspire somebody with it, it's got to be face to face or at least on a Zoom. And that's hard enough. But then there's a chance that you might be able to inspire somebody with a feeling. But you certainly can't transmit it to thousands and millions of people at one time and instantaneously. So yediyah, information, has enormous reach, but no touch. Experience has deep touch, but limited reach. And what do we find at Har Sinai? V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot. Everybody saw the sound. Well, today we understand that. My father always used to say, it's so easy for him to believe in the Torah and to understand the Torah because we understand it scientifically. And this was already a long time ago. But he said, like his father and his grandfather, when they learnt these midrashim and these chazals, how did they understand it? We know what it means to see the sound because we know you can convert sound into an electrical impulse which can be converted into something visual, and you can see it. It can show, you can see it on a screen. It can be blips and it can be proper images on a screen. Faces I see in Zoom in front of me, it's information. I don't see people, they're not people on the screen. It's just bits of information. And we know that that can be done. To be ro'eh et hakolot, to take sound and to convert it into a light wave, into a wave that can travel at the speed of light. They were both there. There was kol, there was sound, and sound is mechanical. Sound is analog. Sound is not digital. Sound is not electronic. But to be able to see the sound, it has to be electronic. So what was it? Was Sinai an electronic experience or an analog experience? It was both. It was both simultaneously. It had the reach of electronic transmission, and it had the depth of a kol, of Hashem's voice actually touching us, actually enabling us to feel His voice. And Rashi says on Ro'im et hakolot, Ro'in et hanishma. They could see that which was heard. She'i efshar lirot b'makom acher. There's no other example of this. In our generation, there is an example of that. We do understand it. Et hakolot, watch voices, hayotzim mipi hagvura. The voices that came from Hashem's mouth, so to say. They were real sound waves. You could hear them, you could feel them. A sound wave you could hear. I spoke the other day at the Matmonim. The tone of voice. You can only really hear a tone of voice when the person's speaking to you directly. You can pick up a little bit on a telephone or on a video. You can pick it up a little bit, but you can't really hear the tone of a person's voice as you can when you're speaking face to face to a person. And we could hear the tone of Hashem's voice. The kol is not just the words. The kol is the tone of voice with which Hashem pronounced the words. They were shocked. We're back to the electricity. They were shocked and they got shoved, they got pushed backwards. Very far, 12 kilometers. That's how powerful the bolt of electricity was. Now, if it was just audio, why would it have shocked them? Why would they have been pushed 12 kilometers away? It was the electrical force that pushed them. They got a shock. But they're also hearing the voice, the real voice. Which one is it? It's both. And the angels had to heal them and bring them back because they'd had such a shock. That was Sinai. A shock, and at the same time being able to hear the real voice of Hashem explaining the Torah to Am Yisrael. And they're both happening at the same time. Now, another difference between the digital, electronic transmission of information and audio, mechanical transmission of information is whether it has to be physical. Technological information, digital information, doesn't have to have anything physical to it. It's funny, I was listening, as I was preparing the shir, I was listening to the shir that I gave on the Aseret HaDibros about 12, 13 years ago. And I talked in that shir about what it's like to go into a store and buy your software on a CD and have it beautifully boxed, and just to have the physical thing and hold the software in your hand. And I said it's much better than downloading it from the internet. You never see it, you never touch it. Little did I know that a few years later nobody would even know what a CD-ROM is, and buying your software in a box, why would you do that? Because digital information doesn't have to be in a box. Digital information doesn't have to be on a CD-ROM. Digital information, we're looking at digital coinage, we're looking at digital currency. What is it? It's just bits of technology, it's just bits of electronic, it's just electronic impulses, it's nothing. There's nothing physical, there doesn't have to be anything physical. But touch has to be physical. You can't touch somebody with data. You can't touch somebody electronically. You can't even touch somebody with a movie, or even with Zoom. You can't touch. You can inform, but to touch somebody, you've got to put your arms around somebody and give them a hug. That's how you touch somebody. You've got to allow your voice, your real voice, to penetrate their real ears. That a voice comes from your lungs, through your throat, into their ears. That's how you touch somebody. You can't touch somebody electronically. Matan Torah was not an exchange of information, just as Limud Torah is not an exchange of information. This is what becomes so important, because today Limud Torah is an exchange of information. It's just become informational. And that's the tragedy. And we've often said that the wonder of today's world of Torah is how much Torah is being learnt. And the tragedy of today's generation is how little Torah is being learnt. And how can it be that so much and so little at the same time? It is so. Because informationally, digitally, a fortune is being learnt. The world is learning, and Sforim are being published, and this amazing things are happening, and it's just too wonderful. But is it touching? Is it really touching people? If people were really touched by their learning, the learning would be different, the people would be different, the attendance at shiurim would be different if they were really touched. It's not touching, because it's informational. And the Yerushalmi says in Tainis, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonason, we had Rabbi Yonason in the Gemara today, Haluchot hayu orkan shisha tfachim v'rochban shlosha. The lucha is, according to this view, were 6 tfachim long and 3 tfachim wide, tefach being about 4 inches. Vaya Moshe tafis b'tfachayim v'akadosh baruch hu b'tfachayim. Hashem was holding the one end, 2 tefach. Moshe was holding the other end. Revach and v'tfachayim revach be'emtza, and there were 2 tfachim in the middle. Just think of that moment. Hashem is holding on to the luchos, and Moshe is holding on to the luchos. A moment in the history of humankind that had never happened before and has never happened since. God and man holding onto the same object. And what happened to the Bnei Yisrael at that moment? God holding, just think of the beauty of that moment. The Rebbeinu Shem is handing over the luchos, Moshe is receiving. Hashem doesn't let go yet, so that for a moment they're both holding the luchos together. And that's the moment the Jewish people danced around the golden calf. They had no idea what was going on upstairs. And how often does that happen, that we have no idea of what's going on upstairs? We carry on our life as if we know what's happening in the universe. That was the moment. And as a result of that, Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lechotfan biyado shel Moshe. The Rebbeinu Shem started snatching the luchos out of Moshe's hands. V'gavra yado shel Moshe. And there was a tug of war. And Moshe wouldn't let go. And Moshe won. And he got it out of Hashem's hands. V'chatafan mimenu. And he grabbed it from Hashem. And later on, the Yerushalmi says how Hashem congratulates Moshe and is so happy that Moshe did that. But he had to do it physically. This was not information that was being transmitted. This was a physical object. There were luchos, they were physical, they were heavy stones. Why did they have to be heavy stones? Why didn't the Rebbeinu Shalom just say, download the Torah? Here's the URL for Chumash, here's the URL for Tanakh, here's the URL for Mishnah, here's for Gemara. Download it. You want a tablet? I'll give you an iPad. You can download it onto the iPad. It'll be done instantaneously. Everybody can get a copy of it. Send it around the world and we're done. No, it's chiseled out on a piece of stone and handed to Moshe, and there's a tug of war over it. It's so physical and so mechanical. We're not talking about information. We're not talking about electronic information that's being transmitted. We're talking about something physical. And what is so important about something physical? There are many things that are important, but for our purposes here, what's important about the physical is if something isn't physical, you can give it away without losing anything in the process. I can share my file with you on my computer, and it might have a lot of information in it. I can share my whole hard drive with you. I can share my cloud with you. What have I lost? Just confidentiality. You've got access to my stuff, but I've still got it. When you're sharing something intangible, the giver loses nothing. When you love somebody, you don't lose anything. When you share an idea with somebody, you don't lose anything. When you share information, when you share data, when you share anything intangible, even an emotion, the giver loses nothing, which means the giver pays no price, which means there is no value attached to it. Imagine a wedding where it comes to the rabbi says the Birkas Kiddushin, the two brachas, and then he says the ring, and the chosen says, you know what? I decided no ring. I'm giving my wife my love, and she's happy with that. No ring. Okay, chuppah over. No ring, no kiddushin. A ring is gold. It's something tangible and physical. We're talking about kiddushin, about a moment of such sanctity. Why do you need a ring? You need a ring for the same reason you needed luchos. You need something that when I give to her, it's cost me something. I had to pay for it. I had to part with something. And that's only in the tangible world that giving entails loss. And what is the act of giving then in the tangible world? It means I believe what I'm losing is worth less than what I'm gaining. That's what it means. If you buy a house for $1 million, what you're saying in that transaction is, this house is worth more than $1 million to me. Might not be worth more than $1 million to anybody else, but to me, it's worth more than $1 million. So I'm happy to part with $1 million because that's what a transaction is when it's something tangible. And so Torah, we see from this Yerushalmi, what happened on Sinai was not an exchange of information. This wasn't an intangible experience. This was a very, very tangible. The Rebbeinu Shalom, and Chazal talk about, the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to say, loses it when he gives. He gives it away to Klal Yisrael. Gives the Torah away. Of course, the knowledge is not given away, but there was something physical that was given. And that's why the shattering of the luchos is such a terrible moment in Jewish history. We see a further example of the combination of the digital and the mechanical. The sound wave and the light wave. We see another example of this. Right at the beginning of the Aseret HaDibrot, Hashem said all these things, saying, says Rashi, Melamed Shamar HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Aseret HaDibrot b'dibur echad. That means Hashem said it all in one moment. Now, how can you talk with sound waves and give it all in one moment? You can do that with digital information. You can write a 25-page email and you can press send. And it goes in one moment. So if it was digital, the entire Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom could easily have given it in one moment, which he did. So then it was digital. We've just said it wasn't digital. And then what does Rashi say? And afterwards, in the Imkein Lama Ma Talmud Lomar Od Anochi V'lo Yelecha. So why does it then carry on? Anochi Lo Yelecha. We've got the sequence of 10 commandments. Shechazar upiresh al kol dibur v'dibur b'fnei atzmo. Because after Hashem had delivered the software, after he downloaded, so to say, everything into Moshe, he then still went and repeated it word for word and taught it. So you can give the information. Now you've got the totality of information. Now starts the teaching. The teaching is not about the giving the information. We want the information. Here's the information. We've got this for him with all the information we need. On a USB, you get a Bar-Ilan USB. You've got Kol Torah Kula on a little USB. You've got all the information. That's not the problem. Hashem downloaded the information in one instant. She'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu aseret hadibrot b'dibur echad. In one moment, he gave it all. And then he started again, teaching as a Rebbe to a Talmid, explaining it, understanding it, where you could hear his tone of voice, you could actually hear him speaking. And the Chizkuni says as an aside, Limadetcha Torah derech eretz, as an aside, the Torah teaches us derech eretz, shelo tehei ruchacha gasa alecha. Don't be so arrogant. Lomar, to say, davar, a single word, lifnei hatzibur, in front of a community, ad shetifshot oto beincha levein atzmecha beis or gimel pa'amim, until you have rehearsed it 2 or 3 times. Don't get up to give a Dvar Torah if you haven't learnt it, mastered it, and rehearsed it 2 or 3 times. Don't get up to give a shiur if you haven't done that. And that was something also. We were raised as children at our Shabbos table. Each of us had to give a Dvar Torah. But those Dvar Torah that we had to give were incredibly stressful, because then my father would critique us. It wasn't just a Dvar Torah, then Yeshukach, isn't he smart? Wonderful, look what the kid did. He quoted a Rashi, fantastic. And then he even quoted from some Medrash says. He actually knew what the Medrash says. Brilliant guy, brilliant. It wasn't like that. It was a very harsh critique as to what we were saying and how. And part of the critique was presentation. Did you spend enough time preparing? And what did the preparation look like? After you'd figured out what you wanted to say and you understood what you were going to say, how long did you take to prepare the presentation? What was going to come first? What was going to come second? Where you were going to ask the question? How you were going to answer the question? How much time did you put into that? That's the Chizkuni. The Torah teaches us that first you prepare it and you have it all ready, and then you present it, because you can have all the information in your mind, but that doesn't inspire. To inspire, you need presentation, and presentation needs time. Information doesn't need time. Information can be instantaneous. You buy the Bar-Ilan USB and you got the information. You open the set of art scrolls, you've got a fortune of information. But if you're going to teach, you're going to inspire people, that needs presentation. That needs a lot of thought. And here again, we just see these 2 elements. The information is instant, the presentation is analog. That takes time. That has to go in an order. And in Torah, we integrate both. You need both. You've got to understand, you've got to have the knowledge, you've got to have the information, you've got to master the information, and you've got to be able to engage with it intuitively and with emunah. You need to have awareness of Hashem physically, that you know the facts, you know what life is all about, and you can see Hashem in the world. How else would you explain it? And you to feel Hashem experientially, leida ula'amin, to know and to believe. But it's not only for emunah that we need these 2 capacities. There's a very interesting thing that often used to puzzle me in the opening of the Aseret HaDibros. Anochi, this is going to be an introduction to the world of God. The 10 Commandments. Every religion in the world, every civilization, every culture knows it, adopts it, believes in it. The 10 Commandments. Who doesn't know about the 10 Commandments? And God introduces himself to humanity forever. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher. What do you expect the next word to be? Bara et ha'olam. You see this universe? I made it. That's who I am. No, Asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim me'beit avadim. I took you out of Egypt. Really? Is that the biggest thing you've ever done? You took us out of Egypt? When you've made everything, you created Egypt. You put us into Egypt. You've created everything in Egypt and everything around Egypt and the entire universe. Is your biggest claim to fame that you took us out of Egypt. But what's important is what changed when Hashem took us out of Egypt. And what changed was Achodesh Hazeh Lachem. The lunar calendar is introduced. And why is that important? Because until then, the solar calendar, if you look at the difference between the solar calendar, the year is an artificial construct, really. The world goes around the sun, and that's a year. Breaking it up into 12 months, why 12? Constellations, you could make 13, 14, 10 months. It doesn't really have to be 12. And the word shana means repetitive. So it's completely predictable. You know exactly where the sun is. You know exactly where the sun's going. It repeats the cycle over and over and over again. The lunar calendar builds itself around the month, the Chodesh. And the Chodesh comes from Chadash. The Chodesh renews itself monthly. The month is not an artificial unit. The month is a natural unit around the moon. And what's important about the month is there's a moment when there is no moon. There's not a moment when there's no sun. In the year, in the cycle of the year, of course, day and night. But there's not a moment when there's no sun unless you live at the North Pole or the South Pole. There's no moment when there's no sun. Sun is always there. With the moon, it comes, it grows, it wanes, it disappears, and it starts again. With Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were given the capacity for national hitchadshut, the ability to renew ourselves, the ability to change ourselves. We didn't have that before. Everything was predictable. Everything was data-driven. Come as the Rosh Chodesh, a lunar calendar, and now we're driven by a different energy, an energy that allows for hitchadshut, allows us to renew ourselves. And when you're dealing with renewal and innovation and creativity, for that you need intuition. Until that time, intuition wasn't that important. But from Yetzias Mitzrayim, intuition becomes important. So when Hashem starts the Aseret HaDibros, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt, out of that whole system that existed until Yetzias Mitzrayim. And I introduced you into a different system of life, of the world, a different system of how the world operates. And I've enabled you to be mitchadesh as individuals and as a nation. You can renew yourselves. You can think of new ideas. You can be mechadesh, you can create new ideas, you can invent. Now how do you predict? When every individual has the capacity to innovate. Now you've got 7 billion people, each of whom can create new ideas. And some university professor is going to be sitting in Oxford or in Boston, and he's going to predict what's going to happen, what's going to come out of these 7 billion people, what new ideas. It's not possible. But with intuition, there's more opportunity to get a sense of where the world is going, of where it might be going, of what might be around the corner, what might be over the horizon, if we allow that intuition to operate. And so when we look at that Anochi, as the Ramban says, that you need to know that I'm Hashem, and you need to feel and believe that I'm Hashem. And that enables such creativity. I'm the Hashem that took you out of Mitzrayim. You're not bound by the limits of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was analytical, Mitzrayim was mathematical, Mitzrayim was engineering, Mitzrayim was all about science. And you've got all that. There's nothing wrong with that, but you go far beyond that. Now you're moving into the world of emunah. And if you have emunah, you don't really need commandments, because there aren't 10 commandments. How many commandments are there? None. None. There are no commandments. They're just statements of fact. Lo tirtzach doesn't mean you may not murder. It means you're not going to murder. You're not going to steal. You're not going to commit adultery. You're going to keep Shabbat. You're not going to commit idolatry. If Anochi Hashem Elokecha, if you really feel you have the true emunah, you're not going to do these things. And when you do these things, the place to look is where the flaw is in the level of belief. Because if the belief was really strong, you just wouldn't do these things. They wouldn't even be possible. That's what the Aseret HaDibrot are. They're dibrot, they're not mitzvot. They're not 10 mitzvot, they're 10 dibrot. So with the Aseret HaDibros, if we just take the introduction of the Aseret HaDibros, the fact that Hashem says them all at once, the fact that they were able to hear the sound and what that means, the ability to have enormous, infinite reach because it's electronic transmission, so to say, and the ability simultaneously to have deep personal touch to every human being who was able to hear the tone of voice of Hashem, not only his words, but his tone of voice, and feel Hashem's presence. The fact that Hashem is telling us that if this is something we live with, we'll never do anything wrong. When we do things wrong, it's just because we have a lapse in emunah, and we need to bring ourselves back into emunah. And if we can develop that intuition and live with that intuition, live next to Hashem, live with Hashem, it's easier also to predict, because where's your prediction coming from? Because you're right next to Hashem. You're getting a sense of where Hashem is leading the world. You're getting a sense of where Hashem is leading you. It's not mysterious. You feel Him. He's there. And Einstein is one of those people who, by his own admission, as brilliant as he was, grasped things that were beyond his brilliance. And the one is his famous comment, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. Intuition is a gift of God. It comes from the Ribbono Shel Olam. It's holy, it's sacred. He calls it sacred. He gets it. Intuition is Ruach HaKodesh. And rational mind is a faithful servant. If you have the faithful servant, the rational mind, serving the intuitive mind. But we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. That's already in his time. And he was talking in the scientific world. The tragedy is it's happening even in the Torah world, where we're honoring the servant and forgetting the gift. It's all about the analytics, and we're not using that experiential, intuitive belief and feeling for Hashem, and feeling for the Torah, and feeling for the mitzvot, and feeling for Shabbos, and feeling for Yom Tov, and feeling for one another, and loving. That's Ahava. That's V'tein b'libeinu. Put into our hearts, b'libeinu, we ask Hashem. Lavin ulahaskil lishmoa lilmod b'libeinu ulelamed lishmor v'la'asos es kol divrei toratecha be'ahava. That's why it's b'libeinu, because we're asking Hashem to help us do it with be'ahava. Ahava is intuitively. Ahava comes from the heart, not just doing it because it says so in Shulchan Aruch. I'm doing it because I love the Ribbono Shel Olam and I love the Torah. And we daven every day. Hashem should help us have that love. So when we have Kabbalat Torah on Shavuot, what are we accepting? We're accepting a lot, but just let's focus for this Yom Tov on what we've talked about today. We're accepting emunah. We're accepting upon ourselves to relate to the Torah in a way that integrates the rational with the emotional, integrates the rational with the intuitive. That when we learn something, we're going to understand it rationally and we're going to feel it emotionally. And that takes time. Daf Yomi is a wonderful thing if you can do a daf in a day. And most people don't spend the whole day on the Daf Yomi. To spend the whole day on the Daf Yomi, still unlikely that you can learn it intuitively. You can get the information. You can get the information in an hour. There are Daf Yomi shiurim, as you know, in 18 minutes. I think there's one in 12 minutes now. You can get the Daf Yomi in 12 minutes. But intuition needs time. You've got to feel Hashem gave all the information instantly, and then slowly, for 40 days and 40 nights, he went over it with Moshe, going over it slowly, feeling it, understanding it deeply, questioning it, sensing it. And so that's what we strive for on Shavuos night, at least this Shavuos, to live and learn not only with mindfulness but with heartfulness, where Hashem is so real that Shmirat HaMitzvot, the keeping of the mitzvahs, becomes as natural to us as the keeping of the laws of science and the laws of physics and the laws of nature. It's just as natural. The laws of the Torah are just as clear as are any other laws that Hashem created and gave us. And so may we all find that this year is a Shavuos where we are able to tap into both. Don't let your Shavuos be wasted only on the rational. Don't let your Shavuos be wasted only on the emotional. Take on the challenge of being able to align and hold together the brilliant rationality of the Torah, every word and every idea of the Torah, and the unbelievable depth of every concept, every idea, and the very Kedushat HaTorah, the sanctity of Torah with which we're blessed.